Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today at CXC 2023. I want to begin this session with a land acknowledgement from Cartoon Crossroads. Cartoon Crossroads Columbus acknowledges that the ancient ancestors of the Eastern Woodland tribes, now referred to as the Adena and Hopewell cultures, inhabited the land we know as Ohio. Their descendants include the living nations of the Shawnee, Miami, Wyandotte, Delaware, and Seneca, Cayuga. We honor and respect the diverse indigenous peoples connected to this place that we gather. I also want to thank our sponsors. We could not do this without them, so including the Greater Columbus Arts Council, the Ohio Arts Council, White Castle, Columbus Foundation, UBS, the Japan Foundation, and many other supporters of the festival. All of these programs and the expo are free to attend because of these many sponsors and their support. So now I'm going to introduce someone to you. And actually, I didn't introduce myself. My name is Anne Drozd. I am the museum coordinator at the Billy Ireland Cartoon Library and Museum. And I also curated the exhibition that's currently up, Facing Feelings, the Art of Raina Telgemeier, that includes a wonderful 20-year look at Raina's career. And if you haven't seen it, the Billy Ireland is open today and tomorrow from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. So there is an opportunity to head over there and see that exhibit. But Raina probably does not need much of an introduction. I can see that this room is packed full of her many fans, but she has been writing graphic novels for youth for many years now. You know her for Smile and Sisters and Drama and Guts and many others. Over 18 million in print. So without further ado, here is Raina Telgemeier.
Thank you, Anne. Hi, everybody. So nice to see all of you today. Thank you for coming to the library for Cartoon Crossroads. So I want to get started by doing a reading from one of my books. And for this, I'm going to need a couple of volunteers. I need someone to play Raina, which means you have to be kind of grumpy and like you're a teenager and you're like, eh. And then I need someone to play, let's see. Who else do I need in the story? Just kind of like, so suddenly I don't remember how this reading goes. Maybe just two people, and someone else is going to be like Raina's mom or dad or sound effects or something like that. So let's do a Raina who's really good at reading and wants to play Raina. You're in the red shirt. You look very good at reading. Am I right? Okay, you can come on up and stand next to me. And then one other volunteer. You look pretty excited about it. Want to come up and read with me? Yeah. You both have like blue hair too. What's your name? Raylan. What's your name? Zoe. So we're going to read off of the screen up here, and we're all going to have to share this microphone. How about, let's see. Well, let's try this, and I'll figure it out. So you're going to play Raina. I'm going to play Raina's mom, and we'll go from there. You're going to play like Raina's friends. How's that sound? Okay. So it starts at a birthday party when Mom says to Raina, time to open your presents.
Earrings. Earrings. Ooh, cute. Earrings. Now you have to let me get my ears pierced, Mom.
I know.
When do you get your braces off, Raina?
Friday.
What about your ears? When do you want to get them pierced?
About a week later.
Cool, so you'll look normal soon.
Back at the orthodontist, twist, push, shove, yank, twist, etc. That's it. Okay. Braces work through subtle pressure. I'm the narrator. Little by little, the pressure is increased.
Kinda weird, huh?
Yeah.
And little by little, teeth move.
My lips aren't used to them yet.
You may experience a slight discomfort during this time.
Touch.
Ow! Ow. Ow. Ow.
Mashed potatoes.
Ow. Ow. My whole head hurts so much.
Why don't you bang it against the wall a few times? That way, when you stop banging, it'll hurt less.
Thanks for the sympathy, Dad.
Come on, let's go see a movie or something. Do you want to come, Will?
Yeah.
Oh, that's you.
Can we get popcorn, Daddy?
Marina's not supposed to eat popcorn while she has her braces.
It's okay. Will can still have some. I'm not that into popcorn anyway.
Pop, pop, sniff, sniff.
Of course, the second you can't have something, it starts to smell amazing. Ow.
Oatmeal.
Raina, are you sure you want to get your ears pierced today?
Sure, I'm sure.
Okay, I just wondered because your teeth are hurting you so much that...
Mom, it's different. I didn't really want braces, but I want earrings.
Okay.
So what if I'm afraid of needles? I want to do this. I think.
This guy. We do the piercing with these ones.
Okay.
We draw dot where earring goes. And now we pierce. Take deep breath.
Ka-chink. Ka-chink.
Done. See? Very pretty.
That didn't even hurt much, Mom.
That's good. Saline to keep them moist, antibacterial ointment so it doesn't get infection.
I'm starting to feel like a real teenager.
Sigh.
Thank you, readers. That was fantastic. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you, thank you. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my childhood and then some about my career and just a little bit about what's going on with me these days. So I was a kid that liked to read. I liked to read novels. My favorite books were probably like realistic fiction, so books by Beverly Cleary and Judy Blume, the Ramona Quimby series. And I discovered comic strips in the newspaper when I was 9 years old. And some of my favorites when I started reading them were Calvin and Hobbes by Bill Watterson. Probably maybe the greatest cartoonist of all time. The strip For Better or For Worse by Len Johnston, which was a family strip about just a suburban family. And nothing fantastical about it, but it was about these real kids. And the strip was interesting because it took place in real time. So all of the characters aged in real time. And Len Johnston wrote and drew this strip for 30 years. So over the course of those 30 years, the kids grew up, the parents got older. It was kind of like spying on your next door neighbors. But they were so interesting and so realistic to me that I felt like they were my old friends. And then when I was in middle school, I started reading Linda Barry's comics. My dad was a fan of her work in like the indie newspapers, and so started buying her books, and then I would just steal them to read. And I like to tell people that when I was a teenager, YA literature was not popular the way that it is now. So I didn't get to go to the YA section and read books. It was either Babysitter's Club or it was like Flowers in the Attic, which was a weird jump. So in that time, I started reading Linda Barry, and her work is just like about teenage life and about the trials and tribulations that kids go through. And I found it just really poetic and really like comforting. And then my dad, who saw that I liked reading comics and was reading them as well, he gave me this specific book to read called Barefoot Gen. The subtitle of that book is A Cartoon Story of Hiroshima. So it was this manga written by an artist from Japan who had lived through World War II, and his family had lived through the dropping of the atomic bomb on Hiroshima in 1945. So I'm reading this book, and I'm like, oh, these kids, they're funny, and like they have this whole life in Japan. That's really interesting. And I knew that there was going to be a bomb at some point, but I thought, well, this is a comic, so I'm sure everything's going to be fine and everybody's going to survive, right? Unfortunately, no. This book is known for being just an absolutely brutal and raw look at the atrocities of war and what happens to people. So the main character, Gen, survives, but half of the people in his family die. And I was so mad. I was like, Dad, that's not cool. You gave me a comic to read, and I thought it was going to be funny like the other ones I like, but this was nothing like that. But it was a very eye-opening experience that comics could actually, I'm going to take my mask off because it's just me up here. Comics could tell just about any kind of story. They could be serious, they could be funny, they could be moving, poetic, etc. And I read that book when I was 10. So it was like just that time in my life when I was starting to think about the world at large. Here's an actual picture of me reading Barefoot Gen at camp at age 10. Wearing like a elementary school spirit t-shirt, and I've got like a Mickey Mouse sleeping bag, and there's one of my teddy bears. And so all of this kind of came together at age 9, age 10, and that's when I started trying to make my own comics. And this is what they looked like. They weren't very good. I didn't know how to do this. I didn't have anybody to teach me that it's easier to draw the box first and then draw the picture inside of the box, or to write out the words you want to use and then try and fit the word balloon around those. And if the word balloon doesn't fit all your words, maybe use less words, maybe spread the words out. I don't know, but even though I didn't have a great handle on it, I just enjoyed it so much that I kept doing it. Still not using things like paddle borders, but I mean, this is about a mom who's like just trying to drink her coffee and like read the paper, and her daughter's like, please take me to the mall. Please hurry up. And I was already interested in the mechanics of comics and how you can use them to play with time and with space. And that was one of the things that was the most interesting to me. Just how can you heighten tension by having a bunch of silent panels? So this would have been age either 10 or 11. And I just really never stopped after that. This is from high school. I got to be a cartoonist for my school newspaper and do really excellent comics like What Type of Prom Date Are You? And then after high school, I didn't go straight to college. I did junior college for a couple of years and then transferred when I found a school that I really wanted to go to. This was like back in the 90s when you couldn't just Google stuff in the same way of ease that you can now. But I found a school in New York City called the School of Visual Arts. And I grew up in California, so it was kind of a long way to go, but this school had a cartooning program. And I was like, that's where I want to be. I want to be in New York where the publishing industry is and the comics people are. So I went there and I majored in illustration and cartooning and learned a lot, met a lot of really great people, including some of my professors, one of whom was an editor at DC Comics. And his name is Joey Cavalieri. And he kind of became, I don't know if he was my mentor or if he was just kind of like a glimpse into what a profession in comics could look like. And the coolest thing about him was that he just brought in tons and tons of books every single week. And I discovered a lot of stuff that I hadn't read before. I had read Understanding Comics and I had read Mouse, but I had not read Bone before I was in college. I hadn't read any web comics ever. I wasn't familiar with artists like Ellen Forney and James Kochalka. So this just like really expanded my mind as far as what comics could be, because before that I thought you either had to do comic strips or superheroes. There was no in between, and this was the time when I learned that that wasn't true. And the other great thing about being in comics classes with comics teachers is that your assignments are to make comics. I don't actually remember what the assignment was for this one, but this is the whole thing. It's a single-page comic about my very first cup of tea. Super exciting topic, right? But, you know, I still was interested in things like memory and mood and just how much you could evoke with simple black and white lines. So as you can see, there's a lot of silent space in this comic as well. Another one I did was about the moon landing in 1969, and there's this song that's about this experience, and so it was kind of like just taking the lyrics of the song and making a comic out of them. And again, silent panels, but it's supposed to be evocative. It's about two sisters who like sneak downstairs in the middle of the night and watch the moon landing on television. And I wasn't using India ink for this. I was using gouache, and this was one of the first comics I ever inked with a brush. I was using Sharpies up until that point, and Joey Cavalieri was like, Raina, all of your favorite cartoonists use a brush, and you have to use your brush too. And I was like, no, you're wrong. So he made me do this for like an assignment, and I was all mad. And then when I finally tried it, I was like, oh, Joey's so right. My work looks so much better with a brush. So I've been inking comics with a brush ever since. And one of the assignments Joey gave us was really interesting and thought-provoking. He wanted us to write a short comic about the first comic that we ever read. And technically that was Calvin and Hobbes for me, but I decided instead of talking about something that everybody knew about already, I would talk about what it was like to read Barefoot Gen for the first time. So I wrote this really short story called Beginnings. And it was just about how I felt when I read it and how I was camping with my family when I finished the book. And, I wrote, I guess Barefoot Gen did exactly what it was meant to do. No matter how big or small of an effect it had overall, it certainly got me thinking about things, not least about the importance and impact of art. And Mom comes along and says, "Hi, how goes it?" And I tell her, "I think that book ruined my life." And she says, "Maybe it actually made your life better. You just haven't realized it yet." So a moment that I had when I was about 10 was a moment that I decided to write about when I was in my early 20s, and that story was what caught the attention of my editors at Scholastic eventually. So whatever you're doing now, whatever small things you're making, you never know how big of an impact they might have. And at the end of each semester, the assignment would sort of culminate with, let's make mini comics out of all the stories that you've been drawing this semester. So I started publishing takeout comics for that reason, because I was in comics classes. And then I just kept going. Even after graduation, I stuck with it and was doing a lot of short story writing still. And the more I went and sold my comics at shows and the more people I talked to, it seemed like the stories that I wrote about my childhood were the ones that really made an impact. And people would always say, like, we liked that one the best, and we really resonated with the ones about your kidhood. So I had been writing just kind of like day in the life stuff about college and my friends. And then I started really leaning into talking about my childhood. And that was kind of how I became a children's cartoonist. Like I wasn't trying specifically to do kids literature, but people would come to my tables at small press shows and they would say, "Oh, this is really cute. Do you think my 7-year-old kid could read it?" And I'd be like, "Not issue number 4, but everything else is fine." And I wanted to be able to say yes without hesitation. So this was where I was in like 2003, 2004, which was a strange time to be getting into the industry. What was really popular at that time was manga. That's what kids knew, that's what kids wanted, and the publishers were starting to bring over a lot of imports from Japan, and they were also publishing a lot of original English manga, which is manga written by North American creators, but was in the style of Japanese manga. So a lot of my friends at the time were being published by Tokyo Pop and by Viz, and it was just like, I didn't really fit into that because my stuff didn't look like this. And the other thing that was going on was that, it was kind of right after the big comics boom, I guess you call it, in the 90s, when comics are not for kids anymore. So all of the comic book stores were really leaning into that. And here I was, again, with like my little like zines about childhood. And I just felt kind of in between, but I kept telling myself, like, if I just do what I want to do, I know I'll find an audience. Even if it's a small audience, that's okay. So in the midst of all this, here's me, like tabling at small press shows. I came to Space in Columbus early on. I used to do Mid-Ohio Comic-Con early on. Like I was trying to get out from where I lived, which was New York, and just get all over the country and try and meet as many people as possible. And I did, and it was great. I feel like I still keep in touch with like a lot of the retailers that I met in those days, and a lot of the friends that I made I'm still in touch with, and some of them are here today, and it's just like a nice feeling. So as all of this was happening, Scholastic was thinking about starting up a comic book imprint, and they were going to call it Graphics. So like I said, I met my editor because one of the editors at Scholastic read my mini comic that had the story Beginnings in it and was like, "Whoa, this is pretty awesome. Like, I want to talk to this person." So she tracked me down and we talked, and she was like, "Hey, we're starting up comics. Do you want to pitch comics to us?" The problem was that everything I had written up to that point in my career was a maximum of 8 pages long. Graphic novels are longer than that. So I was thinking, like, would I do some sort of anthology of my short stories? Would I just, I don't know. I didn't really have a handle on what it was going to look like. So what I ended up doing for them first was to adapt one of my very favorite book series from childhood into comic book format. And that was The Babysitter's Club by Anne M. Martin, which came out for the first time when I was 9 years old. I became obsessed with it, so much so that I even have fan art that I did of the characters back in 1987 or whatever it was. And Stacy had just moved back to New York City at this time in the story, so that's why she's not in the picture. It's not because I don't like Stacy. But my favorite character was Christy. I think partly it was because her personality is a little bit like I'm more shy than Christy is, but she's good at sticking her foot in her mouth when she does open her mouth. And I was the same. And I had a lot of siblings also, and she was responsible. She had a lot of good ideas. Like, she was like an aspirational character, but I also looked exactly like her. I was a tomboy. My hair was always in a ponytail. I wore turtlenecks. So, you know, when you're a kid, you're like, that character is just like me because they look just like me. I was lucky to be able to visibly see myself in other characters. And it's lovely that now there are more visible characters for more people who look not like Christy Thomas, but like themselves. So we have come a long way, and that's great. But yeah, so I started out with this. I did this adaptation series from 2004 until about 2008. I did 4 books in the series. They did okay. Like, Scholastic Book Fairs sold a few copies. It was kind of not a big deal. And like, I'd occasionally walk into a comic book store and be like, do you guys carry the Babysitter's Club here? And they'd be like, the what? So yeah, things were fine. But in that time, I also started publishing a personal story on a website called girl-o-matic.com, and that was this little story, Smile, that I had been kind of wanting to tell for a long time. It was a long story, and I knew that it was gonna like take a lot of my time. So I was like, a webcomic, that sounds fine. I'll just kind of do a page per week and see how that goes. So I started this in 2004, finished it in 2009, and managed to write about 120 pages of the book before I was done with the Babysitter's Club series, and Scholastic said, so what else you got? And I was like, well, I've been publishing this comic online, and actually some of my editors had been reading it online. So they were like, oh yeah, Smile, we like that. So I pitched it to them, and they bought it and then published it in 2010. And that's when things really started to happen for me. I didn't expect for anything much to happen with Smile. Books kind of come and go. And at the time they were like, you know, there's not really a market for like memoir and orthodontic comics. So we think some people will like this, but they were proven so right just by kids. Like, kids found this book and they recommended it to their friends, and then their friends recommended it to their friends. And a year and a half after Smile was published, it hit the New York Times bestseller list. That did not happen right away. But once that happened, everybody was like, oh, momentum, okay. And then they published my second memoir, Sisters, Drama and Ghosts, which are 2 fictional books, but that are also sort of inspired by my life. And then Guts is my most recent book, which came out in 2019. I'm gonna take a sip of water. People always tell me that I move too quickly through my presentations and talk too fast. And they're like, Raina, take a break. Take a little breath. And that doesn't happen unless I have a bottle of water. So I'm good. I got it. Thank you. That's what I really need is aides to like come and help me drink water. Thank you, Jillian. So, I mean, why memoir? People always ask, like, what inspires you to write about your life, and why is it that you write about your own life? And I think, like, my life is not particularly interesting. I don't think I've had like experiences that are so unique compared to other people. I had this weird thing with my teeth that happened, and that was the reason I wrote the story, was because it's so hard to explain to people what happened that I'm like, here, just read the book. That'll tell you everything you need to know. But it turned out to be about so much more than that. Like, all of the friends that I had at that time in my life, sort of like mercurial, like they weren't always that friendly to me, and vice versa. I wasn't always that friendly to them. And of course, I have 2 siblings. I'm the oldest of 3. My sister's 5 years younger than I am, and my brother's 8 years younger than me. And you know, we didn't always get along. We got along okay, but then we'd be like stuck in the car together for hours and days, and that always builds tension. And things like getting a new pet, like, that's so exciting when you're a kid. But then we actually have this photograph that my parents took after we got our first fish that like shows the truth. Like, and this is what I'm really interested in. And this is this kind of like in between stuff, these connective tissues and these boring moments where life really happens. And so that stuff is the kind of stuff I used to write short stories about. Like my first cup of tea, to me that was really interesting. Going to get fish and like being so excited about your fish and then like one of your fish dies. Like that is a great story in my opinion. So I think that's what makes for good memoir. And then the more I started doing this professionally and sort of had published a couple of memoirs, the more I was like, okay, I think my readers could handle some more serious stuff. So I started tackling bigger topics like anxiety. And there's sort of this hint in Sisters that my parents are not happy together and that they might get divorced. So, that's real stuff. That's stuff that real kids can relate to. And I was just getting so much feedback from my readers that were like, I've got a sister as well. Oh my gosh, like I've got braces too, amazing. And even things as simple as like, I've got brown hair, wow, like we're the same. So, I knew something was working and I've tried to lean into it since then. It's getting harder because I've given already so much of what happened to me between the ages of 9 and 15. And I'm like, do I really want to get into like my teen years and my adult years? I'm not sure. I might need I might need more time to go by before I'm ready for that. Like childhood happened a long time ago, so I can kind of be like, yeah, that was a long time ago. None of the people in this story are terrible people. They just seem like they were back then. Anyway, so this is me. This is me in 4th grade. This is my class picture, and I'm wearing like a fancy outfit, and my hair is combed, and like I was smiling, but I talked about like serious topics. And what was really going on for me is that I was a super anxious kid. And I didn't know how to talk to people about it, but I was going through panic attacks. I was having phobias that popped up in 4th grade for the first time. And it was turning me into just like inside my head, nothing was right. But on the outside, it looked like everything was fine. And my parents took notice. And thankfully, like they had the resources and the wisdom to send me to a therapist. And she would just ask questions like, are you being bullied at school? And I was like, I don't know. Like, does that mean people are stealing my lunch from me or like tripping me in the hall? No, none of that's happening. It's just that sometimes we tease each other. And it's just that I'm a really sensitive person. But in the beginning, I didn't know how to answer her questions. And I think what's cool about therapy is it gives you answers to your own questions. It gives you language and the voice to sort of be able to describe what's happening and how you're feeling. So I was able to start talking about what panic felt like and what fear felt like. And because I'm a cartoonist, I'm able to depict this through sort of abstraction and ideas and pictures. So to tell somebody how it feels to be anxious, it's one thing. To show them what it feels like, it's a whole other thing. So when I was working on the draft for this story, one of my friends did a beta read, and I hadn't done this yet. I hadn't really drawn what anxiety feels like. And her feedback to me was, more, like show me more, show me what it feels like for you. And I was like, good note, man. I have a lot of good cartoonist friends. That's why we hang out with each other, is that we're good at kind of giving each other the check. So also being able to depict like what it feels like to like come out of panic and to come out of anxiety and fear and just learning to breathe. And this is actually stuff that I learned both as a child and as an adult, because I did go back into therapy when I was in my 30s because I had not really gotten better. Like I was better just because I had gotten older and lived a little bit more, but I was still really prone to panic attacks. And strangely, I was doing the social isolation thing that we all started doing during the pandemic on my own, just because that's how I felt and didn't want to be around sick people. And we decided that was not a good and conductive way to live my life. So I went into therapy for that. And a lot of the therapy I did in my 30s went into the writing of this book. I don't think I could have written this book, Guts, before I had gone through that experience. But I don't know, I made comics as a kid to kind of tamp down my anxieties, and I guess I do the same thing now. So that's just like a lifetime of what goes into work like mine. And just, I think I want to communicate to my readers that what I went through is normal, and what you're probably feeling right now is normal too, and that it's maybe awesome if you talk to people about it. So the other question everybody wants me to answer is what's going on now? And the nice thing about having an exhibit that's practically across the street is I could tell you, well, I've been working on this exhibit for 2 years. This is true. Anne and I started working on this in 2021, and it seemed like it was really far in the future, but it did really take 2 years to make this exhibit happen. And it's just been such a joy to have it on display at the Billy since May and now until November. And putting it together was really a labor of love. And I don't know if Anne wants to say anything about it. She can, or she doesn't have to. But Anne basically came to my house in California to curate this exhibit and went through all of my artwork from my entire life. And she was there for like a little bit less than a week, but we probably could have done it for another week at least. For me, it was just like boxes of stuff, and Anne managed to make sense of all of it and to take the context of it and to say like, okay, this is the work that's about fear. This is the work that's about happiness. Like we're gonna really put it all into context. And I don't know, I've just never seen anybody talk about my work that way, and it made me realize things that my work does and the strength that my work has. And I'm wondering if some of you are like in the photos I'm showing here. These were taken on the day that I did my opening presentation at the Billy back in June. And it was a professional photographer, John Landry, came and took all these just like beautiful pictures of kids like looking at my work in a display case. And that was me once upon a time. Like the first time I ever saw comics in person, I think it was original Chris Ware's. And they were just so pristine, and they were also massive, and they were in a frame. And just like seeing those gave me the validation that comics were art, that comics were real work, and they deserve to be in a place like this. So to be on the other side of it, amazing, just an incredible experience. Also on display, all of my Girl Scout badges from my childhood. Also like a gallery that has some of my favorite cartoonists, all of whom I have mentioned. They actually had an original from Barefoot Gen that they were able to put on display, and like that was a big get. Good job. And you can also go there and read the contents of all of my mini comics. So they scanned them all, and then you can go to this iPad in the center of this display and you can read every one of the pages. And then some of those pages are on display. So I already talked a little bit about this, but I just want to give more credit to Anne, where credit is due, who really, really thought through this just on like a psychology level and a just approach that I wouldn't have been able to do on my own. And when we talked about this in June, we talked about some of her inspirations behind it, including like The Scream by Edvard Munch, which is like a famous painting that most people recognize this image when they see it, but like that's a face that's feeling emotion. And we probably all feel something when we look at that. And then this one's 100 facial expressions from the Edo period in Japan. And let's see if I can, oh, never mind. That's not what I wanted to do. Okay, come back. Okay, so I'm gonna try to make that bigger, but you'll just have to go to the Billy and see it. Cartoonists have been thoughtful and interested in facial expressions for a very long time. And I think it's cool that cartoonists have kind of developed their own language for comics. We talk a lot about manga in these conversations because manga has a very specific language for emanata, the little pictures that like come out of people's heads and like the way that you depict thoughts and dizziness and stuff. And the American language is a little bit different with using comics language, but there's a lot of crossover now. I think the more that young readers have discovered manga and how much they love it, a lot of that language is now present in our local comics and cartoonists. It's really fun to see, and it's really fun to look at originals, including Calvin and Hobbes. Like, I get to be in a gallery case next to an original Phil Watterson. Come on, he's where it all begins for me. I mean, his command of faces and emotions and silliness and anger and just his parents getting so frustrated with him for acting the way he does. I mean, it was so funny. Like that was the first thing that hit me when I read these, was like, this is so funny. But then I would start studying the faces, and then I would start trying to make those faces. And then I was like, how did he get that expression so perfectly? And as a cartoonist, you just practice a lot and you get better at it too, but I don't think I'll ever be as good as that. And then, I mean, this is another sort of common philosophy with not just cartoonists, but people that are interested in humans, is just the 6 like primary emotions. And this is what a lot of the Billy show is based on, is those 6 primary emotions. And so this was Scott McCloud doing this for Making Comics in 2005. So Anne took all of my work. She read all of my work and then looked through all of my pages. And this is where it gets amazing to me, is that she started doing these like emotions maps. So every time she'd see happiness in a book, she'd make a note of it. Every time she saw sadness in one of my books, she'd make a note of it. And she ended up with this entire database where she could like map the emotions in my books. The biggest one in Smile is fear. The second in smile is sadness. And then it's like, oh man, gosh, I write books about fear and sadness. That's terrible. But again, like we can all relate to these things, right? And so that was how the show was curated, was by creating these databases and then making all these really cool charts. I like charts, so this made me really happy. And then here we are, like there's the happiness gallery. And here's the sadness and the fear gallery. And then there's a space for kids to sit down and make their own feelings and comics. We talked a little bit about the complexity of emotion, where sometimes you're feeling a lot of different ways at the same time. And so that's also depicted in some of my work. And so this is just the info, in case you don't have this information already. North High Street on the OSU campus, and they're open till 5 today and tomorrow. So if you haven't seen it, I hope you will. And the fun news is that this whole exhibit is going to be published as a book. The exhibition catalog comes out next summer. I believe it's August of 2024. So if you're not able to see it, or you have somebody that lives far away who you know would like to see it, you can get them a copy of it in real life. And I'm working on another book that I can't tell you anything about just yet, except this is I can tell you these things. It's coming out in January of 2025. It's 262 pages long. I'm on 250 pages at this point drawn, so it's almost done. And it takes place in a library. And there might even be a comic convention in a library in this book. So the fact that we are in a library at a comic convention is amazing to me. It all comes together. And I have a couple of recommended reads, just because when I do these kinds of talks, people always want to know like what else is out there, what else they might like if they like my books. And I have 3 recommendations for different age ranges. The first one is for younger readers, age maybe 6 and up, is Batcat by Maggie Ram, who is a Michigander and who wrote a book about a cat who's also a bat cat. And Batcat goes on a lot of really spooky adventures and lives on an island inhabited by like ghosts and graveyard cats and all sorts of other fun things. This is a really fun like Halloween read. It's really cute. It's really colorful. Maggie was an assistant of mine for a little while, and they are great. I miss them. They were supposed to be here this weekend, but they're not. The second one is by Gail Galligan, and it's a book called Freestyle. Gail was also my assistant for a little while, in fact, and that's not the reason I'm recommending these books. It's the reason is that they're great. Gail's the person who took over for me after the Babysitters Club series. After my reign ended, Gail's reign began, and they did books 5 through 8. So if you read like Logan Likes Marianne or Christie's Big Day, that was by Gail. And Gail's first original is called Freestyle. It came out in October. It's about a kid who's a break dancer, but then he discovers how awesome yo-yos are. So breakdancing and yo-yos. Go get Freestyle. It's great. And then another book that just came out a couple of months ago for a slightly older audience is a memoir called Family Style by a very good friend of mine named Tin Pham. And this is about his family's journey from Vietnam to America, which I believe was in the early 80s. And he was 5 years old when that happened. And he has vague memories of it. What he remembers is the food that he ate on that boat when his family was crossing. And then he remembers his first meal in America, which was steak and potatoes. And then he remembers the strawberries that his family picked when they were first in America and trying to get extra money. So it's actually a glimpse at his entire life and his family's immigration journey through the story of food that he remembers and loves. And because I also like food, it's a sweet read. It's very poignant and feels really timely right now to read something like this. So that's the end of my little slideshow, and I figured I would do a bit of drawing for you now, if that sounds okay. And what might work is we can do Q&A and drawing at the same time. So I'll ask you guys to raise your hands, then I'll call on people, and then I'll try and draw while I talk. How does that sound? Okay, how about you in the front first?
My name is Emily.
Hi. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I do. What was your favorite book to write out of Sisters, Smile, Guts, Drama?
What was my favorite book to write? They're all kind of my favorite, and they're all kind of my least favorite. When you're in the middle of working on something, it always feels like, I don't know if my ideas are any good, and I don't know if I'm ever going to get finished with this story. And some stories take a really, really long time to come out, whereas others are just like, the ideas feel like they're just flowing out of me like water. And the ones that flowed out the easiest were Sisters and Guts. I'd say Sisters was maybe the most fun, just because my sister and I have such different personalities that depicting two characters on a page that are nothing alike, it's awesome. So like we can play off of each other in a way that is very satisfying as a cartoonist. And it took me just like a little over a month to write the script for that book. And when I write, I actually write with both words and pictures. I write as thumbnails. So I don't sit down and write a script or like type a script or describe what's happening. I just go straight to making little doodles that include the panel borders and include, you know, like the little stick figures talking and stuff. So it's almost like I have a blueprint when I'm done with my thumbnails for what the book's gonna look like. And my editor will then edit my script from that format. And then I start my final art. So what I'm doing here on the screen is I'm just doing kind of a sketch. I'm using the program Procreate, which is actually pretty good at like mimicking what it feels like to draw on paper with pencil. So I've got an Apple Pencil and an iPad back here, and I can change my tools when I want to. So I'm just kind of doing a sketch of an underdrawing, and then I'm gonna do what looks like inking on top of that. Let's see, how about you in the black t-shirt?
My name's David. I've been a fan of your work since I was in middle school in 2019, and I was thinking if there were an adaptation of any of your books, who would you imagine voicing the characters?
Whoa, that's such a cool question. I don't know if I would need it to be somebody famous or if I would just want it to be somebody who's really good at acting. Probably the second one. So just, it could be any kid who's really good at talking and also being grumpy, like, as I described before. So maybe it would be you, I don't know. You were really good at doing the voice before. I mean, I've thought about that too, as far as like if it was a live action actor, but
I do.
Not.
Personally, I don't mind live action, but I think
You think animated would be better?
kill the mood.
Kill the mood. We don't want to do that.
That and get pretty expensive with the since unlike most comic characters, granted this is a memoir, the characters do age.
That's true.
Unlike the others like Peanuts, Foxtrot, Calvin and Hobbes, all that jazz.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I don't know. I hope it happens someday. That'd be really fun. How about you with the cool necklace right here?
My name is Greta, and my question is, which book took the longest for you to write?
Which book took the longest? And you'll see that I can make mistakes in this program and then just tap it to undo my mistakes. That's what's so nice about digital, and it's also kind of a problem because you can start to get really like perfectionist about it. Which book took the longest? So let's see, I'll go backwards. Babysitter's Club #2 took me the least amount of time. I believe I did the whole thing in about 9 months. So if you read The Truth About Stacy and you're like, wow, there's not that many backgrounds in this book, that's probably why. I was on a really tight deadline for that one, and it was back when I still had a day job. And after that book, I was like, I don't think I can have a day job anymore because I have too many comics to make. Good problem to have, right? But that one was about a 9-month turnaround, and Smile took me 5 years from start to finish. All the rest of my books are somewhere in between. Guts took like 2.5 or 3 years. Drama took me about 1.5 years. It depends if it's the only thing I'm working on or if I have other projects and how much traveling I'm doing. Because I sort of have 2 jobs. Like I sit at my desk and I work and make comics very quietly by myself, and then I go out and I do school visits and I do library visits and I go to comic conventions and stuff. So right now I'm not working on my book, but I will draw on the plane on my way home. So I actually love drawing on airplanes. It's strange. Yes, do you want to ask a question?
What is your take on drama, and I think that's the only one that's been banned in some places. What's your take on that?
My take on that is that's lousy. I was talking about this a little bit last night that, you know, banned books seem to be because a couple of people are very, very loud and everybody else is like, what's going on here, man? Like, this is okay. You know, I believe that that families should read the same books as one another and talk about the books that their kids are reading and stuff. But to say that a whole school district has to pull a book just because one person doesn't agree with something, a lot of times that person hasn't even read the book. They just found a list that said this is controversial. You know, says who? My take is that I feel very, very bad for the kids who need to read the books that are being banned. And we're not just talking about like gender stuff or sexuality stuff. We're talking like, oh, this kid is not a white kid. Oh no, like that's controversial. No, it's not. Like that's really unfortunate. And I'm gosh, like trying to cheer on my peers who are coming under attack right now, and the friends that I'm seeing just like have to take on the role of being so active here. I wish we didn't have to do this, but none of us want to stop. Like we're all gonna continue to fight this fight as long as we have to. Thanks. Stay strong, everybody. How about you? My favorite character that I've made. I'd say my favorite fictional character is Maya from Ghosts. She's the younger sister. She's just like full of life and enthusiasm, and she's not specifically based on any one person, but she's kind of an amalgam of like a lot of kids that I've met over the years who just like, you've never met them before, but they just like throw their arms around you and hug you, and they're like, hello, I'm Maya, I'm so excited about life. And you're like, whoa, okay, cool. Like you just kind of go along with them. They're the best. And so she's probably my favorite fictional character. And as far as like real people that I've depicted as cartoon characters, like I said, I love drawing my sister. I love drawing the two of us together because we're so different. And it's just really fun for me. Okay, let's see. How about you in the white? Yes. You say that again? You have one of my books right now? Thanks. Are you going to come get it signed after this? Very cool. Do you have a question you want to ask? No. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Yes, right here. Yeah.
Are you still in contact with your friends from like Smile and Guts?
Am I still in touch with my friends from my books? You know, that answer used to be a little different. When I first started writing my books, I hadn't talked to that many of my friends who were like the mean girls in the books, but then their kids all read my books. So like one by one, all of those friends have come back and they're like, oh my gosh, my kid loves your books. And I'm like, have you read them? And they're like, no. And I'm like, cool. And then I've actually had a couple of people like apologize for being jerks to me in school. That was nice. And the ones that are like my friends at the end of Smile, like the nice friends that I meet, those are still some of my best friends to this day. So I should put a picture of us in my slideshow. Me and Teresa, who I meet like in gym class at the end of Smile, she's still my best friend. We don't see each other as often as we would like, but she's a high school, or she teaches English. She started teaching when she was 23. She was like the same size as her students, and she's just like my favorite person in the whole world. And I just got to see her a couple of weeks ago while she was teaching, and she's so good at it. I love her the most. So and then, so this is a fun story. In Guts, it sort of explores my friendship with my friend Jane from elementary school, and that friend moved away after elementary school ended. And for a few years, we managed to keep in touch, but after high school, I didn't hear from her anymore. And she has a very common name, including her last name. So I tried to like Google search her a few times. I tried to find her on Facebook, and it was not gonna happen. And we were friends like before the days of cell phones and email addresses and stuff. And then I started writing Guts, and I was like, man, I wish Jane could read this so that she could like confirm that these scenes with her family were correct. And then Jane contacted me, because it turns out that she and her kids had discovered my books at the Scholastic Book Fairs. And she was like, oh my gosh, it's me. And then she emailed me, and I was like, you'll never believe this. I'm writing a book about your family right now. Isn't that weird? Do you want to read it? Do you want to like see if it's cool? And she read the draft, and she was like, how do you remember all of this? How did you do that? Wow, it just like blew her mind. So yeah, we've been friends again since then. And she's got a daughter now who's like the exact same age that she was when she and I met. So we just send each other a lot of hearts on Instagram. That's the basis of our friendship now. I'm gonna do one more question just because I know we have just a tiny bit of time left before it's time to go to the signing. And I see a hand in the very back. How about you?
How do you make sure that
How do I make sure that drawing is... Oh, a chore. Great question, and I'm still searching for the answer, honestly. Every time I'm in the middle of a book where I'm drawing 262 pages or whatever, I'm just like, I don't want to draw right now. I'm so tired of drawing. So it's a chore because I have to do it, because I have a deadline, and because my publisher is waiting on me to finish. But I still love it. Like, I still love creating things, and I love the feeling of after you've made something and it's done and you can sit back and look at it. So being able to look at the books I've published and feel proud of them is kind of what drives me to make more of them. Because I'm like, I've still got some juice in this hand. Like, let's keep going. But yeah, I think I still do it because I love it. There are days, that's for sure. But giving myself challenges and like trying to draw things I've never drawn before and environments that I've never drawn before, and sometimes coming back to the ones that are just comforting for me, it all helps. So that's a good place to end it. Thank you all so much for coming today, and I'll see you upstairs at my signing soon, yeah? Yay, thanks.